When sculptor Alexander Stoddart needs inspiration, he looks to the work of Antonio Canova, the great neoclassicist sculptor of the late 18th and early 19th century. His pilgrimage begins at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London.
When Canova died in 1822, he was the most famous artist in the world. And his extraordinary power is no less significant today. Yet the school of neoclassicism in which he triumphed is derided and denounced.
There's no shortage of people who will criticise this work. Short in force and too sweet. They'll complain about its charm and say that the charming has no sincerity. Then they always seem to end up talking about Barbie dolls. And if that fails, they'll resort to lewd comments. For some reason, the work just must be shot down. How they scramble for their Spitfires.
And in the scramble, there's little pause to ask what it is about the insipid charisma shared by Barbie and the Three Graces that so arrests blameless wee lassies on the one hand and world-weary aesthetes on the other.
To my mind, it's the very sweetness of this sculpture that gives it its strength. Look into that palpable serenity and find there something as deep as the rolling Atlantic. And it's the profound emptiness of the surface image that tells of a terrible undertow.
There is no great action here. Their very stillness and serenity shuts you out, refusing you an understanding of who they are and what they are doing. The marble radiates an exquisite chill. There is nothing about this image that comforts the viewer, no reassurance that imperfection still reigns on earth. At the end of the 18th century, neoclassicism dominated the world of painting and architecture, but sculpture still languished in the fading rays of the Baroque sunset. But a young Canova determined that he would create works that recaptured the spirit of Greek antiquity, with its noble simplicity and calm grandeur.
And it was this extraordinary work that was the first to define the new neoclassical language in sculpture. Everything about it asserts a new and radical style. It is a sculpture of action and violence, but action, violence after the event.
Theseus sits in terrible repose over the corpse of the Minotaur, the avenging club held high, but at rest. The fury of the struggle is implicit, but absent from the form.
But how do we know it's neoclassical? Does it really recapture any true quality of ancient Greek sculpture? Well, just look at the smallness of the head in respect of the vastness of the neck and pectoral regions. That sort of manipulation of nature is the very grail of neoclassical practice. And because it was done in an ardent and questing spirit, it cannot simply be dismissed as a piece of cynical pastiche. This is continuity, the real thing.
Theseus and the Minotaur established Canova's fame, and by the end of the 18th century, his studio had become one of the grand tour sites of Europe. In 1798, Canova was commissioned to sculpt a tomb for the Archduchess Maria Christina in Austria.
It is almost universally acknowledged that this work is a thing of unspeakable resonance. It is a triumph of art.
This monument at the Church of the Augustinians in Vienna is Canova's greatest sepulchral work. It seems almost to have an existential quality. It captures the void, presents to the audience an image of no thing. We play no part in this scene. These processing figures are in perpetual oblivion, dwelling on and in death.
These days, there are veritable herds of contemporary artists, all attempting to depict nothing and winning state prizes for their feeble efforts. What makes this particular hole in the heart of Europe so full of pathos is its relationship to the sculpted figures that approach it.
They radiate an extraordinary emotional power as they cross the threshold and enter the darkness. In the maelstrom of production around works like this, the self of Canova and all the other selves, including ours, just gets swallowed up. And while Canova was rampaging through the art of sculpture in pursuit of aesthetic peace, Europe was in turmoil. It is against a background of cannon fire that one best hears the rising song of Canova. As the doyen of the still, Canova's critics had accused him of being incapable of showing figures in extreme action. But a series of mighty works proved the contrary.
Here, at the heart of the Kunsthistorisches Museum in Vienna, there stands a sculpture, ancient in subject, but very modern in form. It is an image of force, and yet breathtakingly sweet.
This depiction of Theseus and the centaur captures the moment of slaughter, but it is contained within the most enduring form of all, the triangle. Within this emblem of stability and permanence, the violent action is arrested and silenced. It is his greatest essay in the static. His Philistine detractors, of course, would say that the work is wooden, lifeless, frozen and dead.
What makes an artist like Canova turn to subjects of mourning and terrible violence? I believe the answer lies close to the search for pure artistry. To me, the greatest art of the West is that in which the hand of the artist is not much seen. To fully serve neoclassicism, the artist himself must stand aside, to commit to the subject, unflinchingly. Faced with this, there is nothing I can do but marvel. It has the power of all great art to arrest and to confound expectation. I also believe it's a deeply spiritual work that speaks of things beyond appearances.
But how far can Canova, the extremist, go in his search for the obliteration of personality and the quest for perfection? Well, he has even stripped kings of their gender. Here in the National Museum in Naples stands the King Ferdinand IV. He exists in a state half human, half divine. Canova has cast him in the guise of Minerva, goddess of wisdom, patroness of the arts, and guide to men in the dangers of war.
It is a little-known work by Canova, but one which I think has something truly astounding about it. It cannot simply be dismissed as preposterous, since Canova, a better man than you or I, worked on it for over 2 decades. It was his companion over the entire span of his mature years. It certainly must have something.
What it has, of course, is the power to redeem through art. It elevates the weak Ferdinand from the mediocrity and petty puppetry of his regime and transforms his flabby old man face into something altogether more commanding, giving him the poise he never had.
So it's a dishonest work. So what? All art is a pack of lies. But what Canova has made here is something to transcend the temporal, something to prove the power of the modern artist.
While Canova worked on his sculpture of Ferdinand, he was also employed in the most sensitive commission of his life, a statue of Napoleon Bonaparte, which now stands in Apsley House in London. There is perhaps no more Olympian image made by Canova than this, Napoleon as Mars the Peacemaker. It is the child of 2 ambitions, Canova's to be the greatest European artist, and Napoleon's to possess that artist, as though he were Europe itself.
I think he desired to test the veracity of his status as the most celebrated artist in the world by taking the emperor and doing with him exactly what the supreme authority, art, intended, to elevate and to reveal.
In pursuit of the classical ideal, Canova strips the very shirt off his back and reinvents his entire appearance. In effect, he does away with the man and his mortality.
This statue demands attention. A naked figure of Napoleon deified and ultimately defied as the god of war. It's hardly surprising then that it became the most controversial sculpture of the early 19th century. As soon as Napoleon saw it, he had it consigned to a darkened storeroom, fearful of ridicule.
Here he stands now, in Wellington's house in London, a trophy of Napoleon's defeat. But one rarely hears laughter in this place. The work still has the power to silence.
When he died in Venice in 1822, aged 64, Canova's body was laid out in state, a hero not only of Venice, but of all Italy. Popes and petty tyrants had all fallen to Canova's preternatural powers of creation.